Hello, it's Brother Paul. Uh, ha- Speaking to you from the woods. It's beautiful here. Got a lot of trees around me. Nice shady position here. I hope you can see me well. I think we're doing pretty good as far as the visual here. Um, I want to apologize for not posting anything midweek. We have had some major technical glitches today, or not today, but this week. Among which are I forgot to bring my charging cable for my computer, and so we weren't able to keep the battery up. We got that replaced with a generic one, that has all kinds of ends that you put on, and a little more expensive than I'd like to pay for, but it's done. And then I lost my phone. I've done all kinds of problems. And not the least of which also is every place where we would go into town to access the internet is closed because of the COVID-19. But we did get permission from Taco Bell in town to sit outside near the building in the parking lot, which has access there, and to go ahead and use their internet. So we should be able to upload this with no problem. Thank you for your prayers as we've been away. It was a much needed break. Elizabeth and, or excuse me, Rachel and Stephanie were able to drive quite a bit on the way up here, which left me fairly well rested as far as an all day drive can leave you rested. We were able to stop at a friend of mine's house, Rusty, and get some rest before we got up here to the camp. Um, we're really happy to be here, really enjoying it. The weather's been pretty good. I was told on before we left to come up here that it had rained every day for a month in this area. But the day we arrived, the forecast changed to sunshine, and so we had several days straight of beautiful sunshine, and then one night of nothing but rain. But it cleared up fairly early, mid morning, and so we really haven't had anything messing up the days too much. It's been pretty good, pretty nice up here. So we're very thankful for that. The weather's been cool and comfortable for the most part. Sometimes late afternoon it gets a little warm, but it's been pretty nice. All right, today we're going to continue as we talk about Joseph. Now, Joseph, if you remember our story, Joseph was his father's favorite son. Out of 12 sons, his father favored Joseph most of all. It made his other brothers, most of his other brothers, very jealous and very angry, and they took it out on him by first committing to kill him, and then one of the brothers was a little more sensible and said, "No, why don't we just throw him in a pit and let let the earth kill him, so to speak." And the with the intent that he would come back and pull him out of the pit later. Well, they did. They throw him in the pit, but before long, some traders came along who were trading to Egypt, and they sold their brother into slavery. So, as after we left Joseph last time, he had just been sold into slavery. So we pick up again in chapter 38, or excuse me, 39. Um, uh, and we see that Joseph, I'll start in verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him on the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. First stop I want to make right here in verse 2. Joseph's a slave, and yet what does God's word declare him? A prosperous man. Um, Even as a slave in his master's house, he was prosperous. God prospered him where he was at. As a slave, he prospered him. Sometimes I think we as Christians have this false notion of what prosperity is. And I know I talk to people all the time, and I hear some of their notions of prosperity, and it makes me cringe because our notion and God's notion, they're radically different things. Our notion is a big house, fancy car, all the money we'd ever want to spend. That's our notion of prosperity, and that's not God's notion. It's being the best that we can be in the situation we're in. And that's where Joseph was. He was a slave, yet God said he was prosperous. God had uh, given him grace in the eyes of his master, and he had, before long, as a slave, Joseph was put in charge of his master's household. He was the head guy when his master was away as the slave. And that's a few thoughts. There's a few thoughts about Joseph's slavery that I want to point out as we go along today, because it is very important that we understand that even if our situation isn't what we want it to be, it can still be what God wants it to be. See, Joseph uh, understood something about God, and it is just because times turn bad doesn't mean God left me. And God used Joseph in spite of his situation. As a matter of fact, God was using his situation for a purpose. I think through history of all the things that have happened to different people, whether it be Christian or Jewish or whoever. And at the time, excuse me, I'm wiping off a little sweat here. At the time, at the time it was happening, most people could see nothing good coming out of it. But as time receded, they could see, wait a minute, that was something good. What I thought was so bad was something good. You can even go so far as the Holocaust. You say, what good came out of the Holocaust, Brother Paul? Well, it drove God's chosen people, Israel, back to their homeland, which is where God wanted them. And now the nation of Israel, which did not exist during the Holocaust, is a nation to be reckoned with among the world's nations. As a matter of fact, when it comes right down to it, if the United States was to get into a war with any nation on the face of the earth, the only nation that I fear is Israel. And it's not because they're giant or anything like that. It's because God has a purpose for them, and so God will protect them. But he used something catastrophic to drive them to where they were. And in Joseph's situation, he used something very, very, very difficult on Joseph to put Joseph in a position that he could use him mightily. So let's go on. Verse 3, it says, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him and made him overseer of his house, and all that he had he put in his hand. So here's Joseph, and his master was noticing something about Joseph. He was a very unique situation that although Joseph's a slave, everything Joseph touches prospers. Everything Joseph does gets better because he's with that. You can that's an amazing position to be in. Is it that did it cause Joseph to win his freedom? No, actually not, because God's purpose was not to give him his freedom yet, but it did cause Joseph um, to be honored even among the slaves and to be given a much better position than he would have been otherwise. And so, and the thing to note in that is in verse 3, it says, his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord prospered him. And because of that, Joseph found grace in his master's sight. And then it says in verse 5, and it came to pass from that time he had made him overseer of all the house and over all that he had, that the Lord had blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in that house and in the field. And he had left And he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught what he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. In other words, Joseph was just so trusted, so allowed to do things his way because that's the way it prospered, that his master had no idea how much money he even had because he just trusted Joseph. He didn't know what he owned because he trusted Joseph. It was an amazing position, and that's a great position to be in. If you're in a position in your life where you're not exactly where you want to be, just ask the Lord's blessing for those around you. I once was offered a job at a place that I was not wanting to be necessarily. I really didn't want to stay in this certain area, and I was offered a job, and I told the fellow that offered me, I said, I'll pray about it. And I went home and in the back of my head, I thought, yeah, I'll pray about it. The Lord's not going to leave me here because this place, there's some problems here. And the Lord said, no, you're going to stay there because I've got something to teach you. And I thought, oh no, Lord, why have you got me here? I don't want to stay here. But I did stay there. And I stayed with a good heart. I tried not to go, well, this isn't where I want to be, but I'm going to stay here, that type of person. I stayed and did the very best I could. And the Lord prospered that which I was doing. It turned out, it became amazing how and I was even amazed. Because it's not that I'm so talented or all this stuff. That's not it at all. It's that God was with me and I was doing what He wanted me to do. And when it was time to leave, he showed me very, very clearly that it was time to leave. And it was very, very interesting situation. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of Joseph. Now, I wasn't a slave. I'm not trying to say it was exactly that way. But uh, when you're in God's hand and God's situation, God will prosper. All right, let's go on. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. That was verse 7. And in verse 8, it says, but he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. In other words, Joseph said, I am not going to do what you asked me to do. She wanted him to commit adultery with her. And he said, no way. My master has trusted me, and I'm going to honor that trust. Uh, now, and that's how he starts, but let's see, he goes on. And he says in verse 9, there's none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? There he hit the nail. He was building up to the big point, right? Not only am I trusted, so I won't break his trust. Not only um, does he give me everything with the belief that I'll be trustworthy, so I am going to be trustworthy. But I cannot sin against God with this wicked thing, and that's something that people today, I think, are. It's a sad, sad thing we see in the world today. People so willing to sin against God because society has elevated sin to a great thing. And that is sad and pathetic. And I pray if you have allowed yourself to slip into sin and you look around and you say, well, everyone else is doing it, too bad. Sin is sin. So let's go on. I'm just going to stop in a couple verses here. And it says, and it came to pass in verse 10, and it came to pass as she spoke to Joseph day by day that he hearkened not unto her to lie with her or to be with her. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there were none of the men in the house with him, there with him, excuse me. And she caught him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left the garment in her hand and fled and got out. And it came to pass that when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spoke unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came into me to mock me. And it came to pass as I lifted my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. You notice the depth of the lies? No, not every woman tells the truth when they're talking about assault, and that's what she's claiming, and she's a liar. Not saying I just check the facts when you hear somebody say that. Make sure it's true. In this case, it certainly wasn't. In other cases, it certainly is. It's like anything. Make sure it's true. All right. Verse 18. And it came to pass as I lifted my voice, he cried and cried that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant unto me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Oh man, what a sad end to Joseph's life, right? Well, not exactly. We got a long ways to go in Joseph's life. But the next verse tells the tale. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So we're going to stop right there um, as we see Joseph has, in his time of being a slave, he prospered and then was thrown in prison under false accusations. And yet, God never left him. And Joseph never failed to trust God. I'm sure there were moments when he was maybe going, "Oh, something's wrong here. Maybe God isn't with me." But he never let those thoughts fester in his mind. He stayed true to God, and God stayed true to him. He was put in prison for a reason. There was a unique situation God had to work out, and Joseph had to be in prison for that to work out. Ladies and gentlemen, today's day and age we live in is crazy. I don't know if you've noticed it. It's crazy. I'm up here in the woods, and every time I go into town, I hear some more absurd things coming out of our world. You know, it was just a few months ago that everyone was talking about this virus, and it was going to kill. They said up to 5%. Some said 3, some said 5. But and if we didn't do this or that, millions were going to die in America. And yet, it didn't really come to pass, except in areas where they did really, really stupid things, like New York, where they put sick people in nursing homes. That's where it was catastrophic. But the rest of the United States has had hardly anything. And once America became aware, I guess is the word I want to say, aware of the fact that this virus was not going to kill 3% of us, or 5, or even 1. Its real death toll was around maybe 1/3% less than the seasonal flu. Once they were aware of that, the powers that be were frustrated because the media And certain groups in America had used this virus, which was a legit virus. And at the beginning, I think they were trying to be legit. I don't think anyone was lying at the beginning, except the Chinese, but we won't go there. uh, and and but the powers that be that were trying to use this for their political benefit realized it wasn't working. And then up comes a case where a white cop kills a black guy. Now, I can't see anything in the video that leads me to believe he killed him because he was black. It just so happened he was. But now all of a sudden, the United States is in an uproar about justice. Well, if I'm killed, folks, and I'm murdered, what is justice? It's catching the murderer and putting him where he belongs, on the death row or in prison for a long, long time. That's justice. And the murderer um, has been arrested. He's going to go on trial. I think that's justice. Seems to have been served. But it doesn't matter. The riots and unrest continue. And it's because we're in a position in America where the riots and unrest have nothing to do with the original case. That was the excuse to kick it off. That was the excuse. There's been those that have been silent for a year or two in America who were rioting a few years ago, who've been looking for an excuse, and now they have it. They have their excuse. How will we respond as Christians in America? We're in a position we don't want to be in. I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to have to worry about riots and civil unrest in America. Here's how we do it. We do like Joseph did and do our best no matter what. We do our best. We try our hardest. Now, what that means to each one of us, I don't know. What it means to me may be different than what it means to you. Each one of us have the place God has put us in. So, as you understand Joseph's story, and it's going to get worse before it gets better, understand that its application is absolutely for us. And it's not that we're going to be sold into slavery in Egypt. It's that Joseph was put in a terrible position, and he didn't allow the position to change who he was. And I think that out of this situation we're facing in America, we could very well see persecution. We are seeing some persecution in America. Churches were burned down during COVID. There was at least one that I know of that was burned down, and they said, "You're not gonna meet now, are you?" That's persecution, folks. And it may get worse and worse and worse. And let me tell you what persecution is going to do to Christians in America. It's going to show us who the real ones are. That's what it's going to do to the Christians in America. Because the fakes and the frauds are not going to risk them getting arrested. Now, some will choose to stand there and with their fist in the air and screaming at the government. And some will choose to just obey God and just keep going. Some will choose there'll be all kinds of paths, and I'm not even saying which one is the right. Some people may be called to hold their fist up to the government, and some may just be called to just humbly do what they're doing and being a Christian in the right way with the right attitude. I do know in prosperity Christians fail and falter terribly. I don't know why. It's like spoiled children, I suppose. But hopefully, in face of this persecution, those of us who are watching this video will rise to the occasion and will throw off the worldliness that's infected us and get rid of the sin that we've allowed in our lives and serve God faithfully. Well, this is Brother Paul, and I will Try to get a midweek one up this week. I should be able to now that everything's beginning to get back to normal. So thank you, folks, for listening. Give me a thumbs up if you're on Facebook or YouTube. And I love you, and I'll see you. We'll be back together a week from Sunday. I don't remember the date off the top of my head, but we'll be back together, and we'll post the time and the place. We love you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.